Okay. Good afternoon, Frank.
Good
It's been,
afternoon, Professor.
what, 2, 3 weeks? I've been traveling, and I think you have as well. But globalization has continued to progress.
It
And
has.
I was very interested to see in The Economist, and I'm not sure which issue it was. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, a special briefing on the world economy, which gave some very interesting statistics to underline their argument that the crash in 2008 created a pause in globalization, and it wasn't certain that it was going to take off again because so many countries had found that they were exposed to international forces that created serious internal financial problems for them, and they responded not the way the economists would like them to respond, by exposing themselves more, but by building defenses around themselves and reducing the amount of money flowing between national financial systems. And I think the figures they gave were that there was $13 trillion a month moving between countries in 2007, and it was now down to 3 point something trillion, an enormous drop. And this was argued to be a really significant pause in the way globalization is progressing. And my immediate response was, but that assumes that everything that happens is somehow embedded in the economy. And look at information. Did information cease to, the information flows cease to increase? I don't
Right.
think so. And it seems to me that the amount of information movement has continued to not only to increase, but the acceleration has increased. And it's not only the acceleration, but the inability to control it. And not only the inability to control it, but the unreliability of any information that we get, and the
Well,
need to have much better methods to process information and to critically evaluate it. And that seems to me to be the most important part of what's happening with globalization.
well, I would completely agree with you. I mean, the economist obviously is going to focus on the money. I would wonder how they would explain the Arab Spring. I would wonder how they would explain what's going on in Syria. I would wonder how they would explain the ongoing civil unrest in China, which I think we're only seeing a small part of. And I think that the social communication and the contacts between people on a horizontal level just continue to exponentially increase. And they may not be measurable in terms of dollar transfers between country or national economies, but I don't necessarily think that in this day and age, it may have been 2,000 years ago a valid metric to be able to determine what trade was between village A and village B, to be able then to surmise that there was cultural contact between them, but no longer. I mean, people
It's
communicate on
interesting.
Facebook all the time.
In 2008, Obama got the reputation of being the first E-president, but he didn't realize what that meant at the time.
No,
Because he's presided over 8 years of increasing information flows, which he can't control and which are in fact rebounding against him now, with the reaction of Dilma Rousseff I just learned that Glenn Greenwald actually spoke to the Brazilian Senate about information.
uh-huh.
And of course, now today, Merkel has got somewhat upset again about new revelations, and the same has happened in France. There's just the ability to control it, or to and the idea about who has ownership of information is being completely reevaluated all the time.
Well, I think what's happening is I think there's a recognition that And I think anybody has this, that information is frankly not owned. I mean, if you're going to put information on your computer and your computer is hooked to the internet, you know, you can kiss it goodbye. I mean, it's not going to be permanently preserved in privacy, so to speak.
And we, starting a few years ago, began to be persuaded, but we were persuaded by the administration here to add a couple of paragraphs to every course syllabus about plagiarism.
Okay.
And part of the reason for this was that it's no longer quite clear what plagiarism is.
I don't doubt that.
The boundaries of it are.
I don't doubt that.
And then in this week's Economist, there's a special briefing on research and the fact that a lot of research that has been done in the last decade or so is apparently not being, people are finding they can't replicate research results,
Mm-hmm.
which shows that the scientific method that everybody came to agree on in the course of the 20th century is in fact not working.
You had mentioned that earlier, and I think that's very disturbing because science has always served as the sort of the final bulwark against this culture of sensationalism and game shows and reality shows, if you will. But I would submit, I had a minute or two to think about it as we were going through our connection ordeal here. It may be that because of the explosion in information, that there are many, many more scientific research projects that are ongoing. And it may be that the percentage has not changed insofar as faulty science, but just the aggregate numbers might be very different.
That's an interesting idea, and that's a possibility. But it also suggests that, I mean, what I've been coming to think in recent months is that not only is our relationship to information changing, so that we don't teach information anymore. We teach method about how to deal with the information and where to find the information you want. But also, it's not just the quality of information that's available. It's the fact that it's becoming more and more difficult to tell the difference between factual information and opinion.
It is, but let me ask you a question. As an educator, is knowledge of information as important as conflating of various types of information in order to create new things more important? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound like the founders of Google, but that's presumably what they would argue, is to be able to bring everybody up to a more enriched level of information. If you knew the information is available anywhere at any time and you knew how to get it, would that not serve as a better springboard for intellectual growth? I don't know.
I think that our ability to understand things and the amount of data, our relationship to data generally is going through a phase of change and it's very difficult for us to see what we're going to arrive at in a decade or so. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, what I try to do is to teach research as a method and tell students that the most important thing is that you have a hypothesis, a working hypothesis that you are testing. So you're looking for information that would support it and information that would contradict it. But at the same time, you have to critically evaluate all the information you use. And it's the critical evaluation that is becoming more and more difficult.
Right, and that's a skill that's more and more absent.
But it's also, of course, yes, because since the types of information that are becoming available are changing all the time, it's very difficult to teach mm-hmm. A critical method that will be satisfactory for very long. However, I wonder I mean, we used to talk about truth. I'm not sure what truth is anymore. And I'm not sure about the problem that you mentioned a few minutes ago, the problem of ownership of information. And we have all these suits for personal property that now deal with royalties in particular.
Right.
Is it going to be possible to maintain private property of information of any type, whether it's what you create yourself or what you own for other reasons? I think all this sort of thing is going to change, and that's what makes that particularly interesting is that we moved from an economic phase of history in which everybody was agricultural to one in which everybody was industrial, mm-hmm. and now we're moving to one in which everybody is in services. Mm-hmm. If everybody is in services, information becomes more important for the way everything works than it ever was before. Mm-hmm. And if we don't know who owns the information, that's going to create a lot of difficulties.
Well, I'm wondering from an anthropological perspective, if you look back historically, I mean, if there was ever a time, say 10,000 years ago, where probably longer than that, where you could ensure that every village of human habitation had knowledge of the wheel, had knowledge of how to make fire, had knowledge of how to plant seeds. I mean, would that have not provided a more even growth and perhaps led to greater innovation faster?
I think that specialization started relatively late. I mean, in the ethnographic studies I did in the middle of the last century with relatively low technology communities in Western Asia, although there was specialization, everybody knew how to do everything, even mm-hmm. if they didn't really have experience doing it. Mm-hmm. Could easily switch occupations if they needed to.
Okay.
But it's only really since the Industrial Revolution that that's become impossible. Mm-hmm. And of course has become now impossible at an accelerating rate and in a much more complex way.
That's true. There's precious little specialization switching going on these days. Mm. In fact, I'm sure you saw the article in the press maybe about 3 weeks ago that Americans fare very poorly, actually just below the UK, insofar as some very basic educational metrics, such as how to make change, how to navigate using a map, some very basic things. I mean, it was quite
absolutely amazing. And at the top was Finland and Japan.
Yes, yes. And I mean, this was not a study of children. This was a study of adults.
Yeah, and actually it was a study of different age brackets, right?
That's correct.
No, it was a very interesting study. Well, of course, one doesn't know how good the methods were that were used.
Well, it was the OECD commissioned it, so presumably there was some substance behind it.
One would like to think that it was entirely trustworthy.
Right.
And if it has an effect on government policies in this country, that may be a good thing. Mm-hmm. But it is surprising that America was lower than, I think, every West European country.
It was. Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What are the Saudis doing?
Well, they're very unhappy.
Do they not know that we now produce more oil than they do? What are they doing?
They still produce a fair amount.
Well, I know they do.
And they have bigger stores, verified stores, than anybody else. But they're they're unhappy with us because of Bahrain, because of Syria, and because of Egypt. And they're pouring lots of money into Egypt and Syria because they because of the rivalry with Iran.
Correct.
It's interesting that William Hague actually stood up and said in London that the longer this conflict in Syria goes on, the more sectarian it becomes. So it started off as a local Syrian conflict in one part of southern Syria, then it became the whole of Syria, and now it's become the whole of the Middle East. And in fact, everybody, all the international, main international powers are to some extent involved in it.
Right.
and there's no end in sight. And they've got to talk to Iran if they want an end to it, because, in fact, they've got to talk to Iran and Saudi Arabia. But, of course, they won't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering whether I'm going to go to a conference in Cairo in February.
Oh, be careful.
I
Yeah.
think it may not be a good idea.
No, I don't think so. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day that a lot of what's going on from Saudi Arabia now, including the standing down from the Security Council, and the displeasure with the United States, is based upon their fear of this cozier relationship that we apparently have with Tehran.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, wait a minute. We don't have the relationship yet.
No, but we're talking to them as though they're normal people.
Yes, we are. What's wrong with that?
Well, but the president of Iran is considerably younger than the king of Arabia.
Yes, yes, he is.
And the opinion seems to be that the decision to decline the seat on the UN Security Council was made by the king in a fit of pique. Whether that, of course, one never knows whether these things are absolutely true or not, but that's what seems to have happened.
Just very quickly, during all of those years of American and relations with the Shah of Iran, how were relations with the Saudis?
Okay. There was no big problem between the Shah and
King Faisal.
No, that was basically okay.
Okay.
No, the problem started with Khomeini.
Yes, well, yeah, I can see that.
And then because the Shah was secular.
Very much so. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well. Now that we have our technical problem solved, we can look forward to reconvening on a regular basis.
Okay. Well, then I look forward to talking to you next.
All right, Brian. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.